Well, joining me now are three members of the Commons Defence Committee who heard from Katie Telford. Anita Vandenbeld is a Liberal MP for Ottawa West Nepean. James Bezan is a Conservative Defence critic and the MP for Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman. And Randall Garrison is the NDP critic, a Defence critic and MP for Esquimalt, Saanich, Sooke. All three of you, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, let's start with the testimony. You've just come straight from that hearing. You heard the testimony. Ms. Vandenbeld, let's start with what you heard today from Katie Telford. How did what you heard today further the understanding of how the government has handled the allegations of sexual misconduct against General Jonathan Vance? What do you make of it?
Well, first of all, I think what we really saw today was the sincerity and level of commitment to the women and men of the Canadian Armed Forces. And everything that Ms. Telford said today is consistent with what we have heard previously in the committee. Whether it was Mr. Wernick, Ms. Sherman, the minister who appeared for 6 hours, what we've heard is that there wasn't anything known in 2018, that there was a complaint. We know now, in hindsight, that it was an email, a sexually suggestive email, but even that wasn't known. And so there was a PCO, which is the appropriate authority to look into it, reached an impasse. And what we learned new today is that Ms. Telford, nonetheless, even though Mr. Walburn said he did not have the permission of the complainant to be able to bring anything forward for any kind of investigation, we do know that she made the extra step to get assurances through Ms. Sherman from Mr. Walburn that there wasn't a safety concern, that there wasn't anybody that was actually in trouble at that moment. And I think that also shows the level of commitment of Ms. Telford. But really, there wasn't anything new today. We learned exactly what we've always known, which is that there wasn't anything to tell.
Okay, James Bezan, you repeatedly asked Ms. Telford why she didn't tell the Prime Minister. She said she didn't tell the Prime Minister because she didn't find it relevant. She was told that they were not to pursue the matter further. That the PCO, the Privy Council Office, has said, we will take over this investigation. What do you make of the testimony?
Well, first of all, there was no investigation. It was just them reaching out and dropping the ball. Secondly, we asked her over a dozen times why she failed to tell the Prime Minister, and if she didn't direct it, who directed and made that decision not to inform the Prime Minister. So it is just more evidence that there is a cover-up here, and that's a failure to both the complainant who had come forward with these allegations, to former Defence Ombudsman Gary Walburn, and it's a major failure to the men and women who serve in uniform, especially to those women and men who have to live with sexual misconduct and have experienced sexual harassment. So the sad story in all this is that Katie Telford acknowledged that she knew it was a serious allegation and yet never followed through on it. And by not sharing this information with the Prime Minister, if we're to believe her, and if we're to believe the Prime Minister that he didn't know, and she had multiple opportunities to inform about the allegations, they continued on to give him a pay raise, they continued on to leave him in charge of Operation Honor, and they continued to extend his contract for another 3 years. And during that time, those that serve continue to suffer. And today did nothing that shows that the government is taking this serious and will restore the trust and confidence in such a major institution for the Canadian Armed Forces, and that includes in the rank and file who continue to serve today.
Randall Garrison, your take on this. What do you make of it?
Well, I don't think we need to continue down the procedural rabbit hole with the Liberals. What we learned today is what we've known all along. The Minister of Defence knew there were sexual misconduct allegations against the Chief of Defence Staff. He told the Prime Minister's office, and the Prime Minister ought to have known. And what do we have for action as a result of this? No investigation of Vance, leaving him in charge of Operation Honor for 3 years when he was one of the perpetrators of sexual misconduct. And what we have is a failure of the government overall in its programs that are supposed to reduce sexual misconduct in the Canadian military. And we still have complaints of sexual assault, sexual harassment occurring about once every 2 to 3 days in the Canadian military. So what I'm looking for now is the action from the government that demonstrates they understand the severity and urgency of this problem. And after 6 years, I still don't see that action.
Okay, Ms. Vandenbeld, that's the next question then. What do you make of this then as a committee? Is your committee's work done? I know you have to produce a report, but in terms of hearing witnesses and all that, where should your committee go from here?
Thank you. And I think I need to correct what Mr. Garrison said first about, I think very clear now that nobody knew the nature of those allegations. But
It's
I'm very glad
simply not
to hear
true.
about
It's
moving
simply not
toward,
true, Anita. The evidence is there, whether you want to look at it or not. It's
Okay, well,
simply
let's
not
let one person talk.
And what I'm very glad to hear, and I heard from Ms. Telford today, was assurances of action. She used those words, and we know that Madame Arbour and General Carignan are starting immediately to make sure that we create the kinds of processes where people, women and men, can feel that they can come forward.
Okay, I want to put something to you.
Okay,
I want to put something to you. You talk about action. One of the things that Katie Telford did say in her very opening statements was that she asked herself very often whether they had acted enough on the Marie Deschamps report 6 years ago that called for the creation of an independent way of looking into complaints and allegations of sexual harassment and violence. She said she often asked herself whether they moved ahead. Now you're announcing, as a government, another year-long study before you move ahead on an independent means to investigate these reports. Are you moving ahead fast enough?
Well, I think that everybody realizes the urgency of this, and just to go back to that point about the actions that were taken, I would go back to what Jody Thomas, the Deputy Minister, said, which is that in 2015, Madame Deschamps' report was left to be interpreted by the department and by the military. This time, it won't be interpreted; it will be implemented. And Madame Deschamps laid out the problem and gave very general specifics about an independent body. What Madame Arbour is doing is actually giving exactly what that will look like, and then it will actually be created. And just to be clear, there was a lot of action taken. There was a whole piece of legislation, C-77, a new institution created, the SMRC. Do we know now that it wasn't enough? Of course.
Okay.
Of course we do. And yes, absolutely we'll move faster.
Okay, on your fellow committee members, James Bezan, is it time for the committee to just get down to writing that final report, or are you going to fight for further witnesses?
Look, we've had to deal with this cover-up. The Liberals continue to obfuscate, and the women and men in uniform are still waiting for results.
Right.
And reports are one thing, and we suggested as Conservatives over 2 months ago that we need to set up an independent organization, take it outside of the chain of command, that we need to have a
right. But in terms of your committee, have you taken this as far as you can take it?
Well, this is something the committee will have to discuss and go on from there. But at the end of the day, we still have to come back to the issue of that we have a Liberal government that refuses to act, and that we still don't have the answers on who's responsible for this cover-up. And so the buck stops somewhere with this accountability. And so Minister Sagen, Katie Telford, and Justin Trudeau are all implicated in this cover-up. And we need to look at next steps on the accountability side. And ultimately, we have to address the issues of making sure that the services and the leadership is in place to build confidence back in our Canadian Armed Forces.
Okay, Randall Garrison, if you have your druthers, what should the committee be doing next, and what are next steps?
Well, I think what's really important here is that we finally get some action that will meet the requirements of the Deschamps report. And what we learned today is the Prime Minister never, ever asked the Minister of Defense to implement Deschamps' recommendations. So we've essentially wasted the last 5 years when we could have been making progress. And what the Prime Minister asked the Minister of Defense to do was work with senior military leaders on reducing harassment. Well, who he ended up working with because of this failure to act against Vance were people who were themselves responsible for sexual misconduct. So again, going forward, I'm not sure how any new measures can have any credibility as long as no one takes responsibility for the failure to investigate and remove General Vance.
Okay, on that note, I want to thank all three of you, and I want to wish you a good, healthy, happy weekend. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Martin.
Thank you.